This video covers the IGCSE Biology Objective 9.2.3 on the 2025 CAIE syllabus to state how activity of the heart can be monitored. So there are several methods in which the heart can be monitored. The first one is pulse rate, and pulse rate is measuring the heart rate as the number of times the heart beats in 1 minute. And there are various locations on the body that are used. Typically, the wrist, which has the radial artery, is the one that would be used by nurses and doctors in the hospital, or when you're having some sort of checkup in order to measure your pulse rate. So what it is the expansion of that artery that they're pressing on as the heart pumps blood around the body. So you can see in this little animation that the artery is expanding as blood is being pushed through. So a normal pulse rate is between 60 and 100 beats per minute in an adult. It depends on the person's fitness, on their weight, on their height. A number of factors will determine where they fall within that range. The second type of measurement that is used is called blood pressure. Blood pressure measures the force which blood hits the artery wall. So with a normal adult, that reading is 120/80, and so there are two readings. And so this is measured with a blood pressure cuff, and the first reading is when the doctor can hear the pulse or hear the heartbeat in the artery. If you have the cuff on, you can probably feel it as well because it's pretty tight. And then the second reading is when the pulse rate stops. And so that typically is how the reading is done if it's being done manually. So the first, or the top measurement, the 120, is when the heart muscle is contracting. So the force with which blood hits the artery wall when the heart is contracting during systole. The second, or bottom measurement, that 80 measurement, is when the heart muscle is at rest or in diastole. So the force at which blood hits the artery wall when the heart muscle is at rest. So those are the two measurements. And depending on the numbers, then that will determine how well your heart is working, how healthy the circulatory system is. Another way that your heart can be monitored is through auscultation. Everyone is very familiar with this. This is when the doctor is listening to your heartbeat with a stethoscope. So heart sounds are due to the heart valves closing. As a reminder, the two types of valves are the atrioventricular valves between the atrium and the ventricle, and the semilunar valves between the ventricle and the arteries leading out of the heart. And so what the doctor is listening for is the sound of these two valves in sequence. So the first sound you hear is due to the AV valves closing. This is called the lub. And the second sound is due to the semilunar valves closing, called the dup. So a doctor listening to your heartbeat with a stethoscope is hearing the last way that your heart can be monitored is through an ECG, an electrocardiograph. This is measuring the electrical activity of the heart to see if the heart muscle is contracting and relaxing properly. So in a previous video, I talked about how there is electrical nodes at the top and the center of the heart that are actually going to cause the contracting of the heart muscle, and so if that's not working properly, then your heart will not be contracting and relaxing properly as well. So what does this graph tell us? Well, there are different peaks and valleys on the graph, and so the first small little peak is when the atrium are contracting, and then when the line flattens, the atrium has relaxed, and then we see the tall peak for the ventricle contracting, and then we see the smaller peak after that for the ventricles relaxing. And so that's the basics of what this particular graph will tell you. So why is this important? Well, if we take a look at the different types of readings that can be seen with just an ECG, we can see that there are many different problems that can be discovered just with looking at an ECG, for example. So the tools that are being used to monitor the heart are important because they can detect changes in the heart rate and the heart rhythm. They can detect changes in how the heart is contracting, and these are all going to be essential in detecting life-threatening conditions. So it's very important for your physician to be monitoring your pulse, your heartbeat, listening to the heartbeat, blood pressure, and if necessary, to do an ECG.